And we're continuing with the theme of universalism in the Sandarbhas, which we started last time. And in the last class, we did a wide sweep of the main topics covered throughout the Sandarbhas, dealing with epistemology, ontology, sadhana, or practice, and prayojan, or sadhya, the end state to be attained. And we showed, by pointing out a few of the key concepts that are actually universal in nature, such as this, in epistemology, this vachya-vachak sambandha, which suggests a higher cognitive mode of knowing, that although the specific term refers to the relation between the revealing text and the absolute that it refers to, but it necessarily also includes the pramatri, the agent of knowing, who is brought into this relation. And we made the point that in approaching the text in this way, it changes the whole, let's say, approach to the text, the whole reception of the text from the very root. Okay, because it invites us to participate in the text in such a way that it becomes self-disclosive and not merely an exercise in mastering a set of propositions. Then we only briefly touched on the universal aspect in ontology of the Visheshya, Vishisht, and Visheshan. This is something that we'll develop more today. And we also made the point that in sadhana, samukhyata, or the turning of attention toward the absolute, is the essence of all practice. And this is universal in nature because not only all spiritual paths involve some type of turning of attention toward the absolute, but that this is the key factor in all knowledge systems. That it is the lending of attention to the subject matter of study that allows for its disclosure. And in prayojan, we discussed how at least within all the spiritual traditions, the universal idea of mukti or liberation actually involves paratattva sakshatkar. It involves the immediate intuition of the reality, however the reality is outlined in the path. The goal is to immediately realize that reality. So this is this term of paratattva sakshatkar is really summing up what liberation entails. Not only a liberation that comes after death, but a liberation that is here and now. So these are some of the universal concepts that we discussed last time. And now we're going to continue to develop these themes. We're going to approach it from a slightly different perspective. And for this, I wanted to introduce something called holonic theory. Okay, Okay, this is something that has been elaborated in great detail in the works of Ken Wilber, who's one of the leading theorists in the field of transpersonal psychology and also integral spirituality. And the idea of holonic theory is that reality encompasses a series of wholes. So basically, to give a simple illustration of this, okay, so the simplest whole is matter. Then life, mind, soul, and spirit. Okay, so this particular diagram would refer to ontology. So you can see here that these are dimensions of being. The most basic being matter. And life, biological life or organisms, they include matter, but they also have another component which transcends matter. So each of these dimensions of being, like as we move outward, each encompassing circle includes something, or includes the basic dimension of being inside of it and something beyond it. Mind includes both biological life and matter. Soul includes mind, life, and matter, and so on. And actually, this is a concept which in a way is referred to in the famous Upanishadic verse, Om Puranam Adaha Puranam Idam Puranat Puranam Udachyate Puranasya Puranam Adaya Puranam Eva Vishishyate. So this particular Upanishadic verse is referring to the various dimensions of being, and makes the interesting point that they are all complete within their own field. The Upanishadic verse is saying that Adaha Puranam. Adaha is pointing to the beyond. So the beyond reality, the reality that is beyond, is complete. And idam, this reality that we experienced directly, is also complete. Now, how is that? This is explained in the next line of the verse. Puranat Puranam Udachyate. That which emanates from the complete is also complete. And this theory is discussed in the Paramatma Sandarbha, where the Parinamvad, that the Prakriti is a Shakti of the Absolute. So as a Shakti of the Absolute, that which emanates from the real is itself also real. And it is complete within its own dimension of being. And the verse goes on to say that Puranasya Puranam Adhaya, if you subtract the complete from the complete, Puranameva Vashishyate, what remains is only the complete. So I sometimes refer to this verse as the mathematics of infinity. So this verse is actually, in a way, pointing to this holonic theory. And what I wanted to point out in today's class is that not only Jiva Goswami, but actually all the Goswamis, in particular, Jiva Goswami, Rupa Goswami, and Sanatana Goswami, have repeatedly developed many, the various aspects of their philosophy in precisely these terms. So we're going to be looking at this now. Do we have the?
It's on the cover there, under the picture.
Ah, okay. Thank you. Okay, so beginning with epistemology, which is Jiva Goswami's starting point in the Tattva Sandarbha. Let's see, one, two. Now I'm going to add a few categories, and I'm going to use some abbreviations. So we could start with the original Vedas. And from there we move to the Brahmanas, Aranyakas, Upanishads, Vedanta Sutra, and the Bhagavad Puran. Now this is meant to be somewhat illustrative, so it doesn't necessarily need to be taken as worked out in all of its implications. But basically, in the development of the Vedas, from the Brahmanas to the Aranyakas to the Upanishads, there is a movement from, the Vedas are mainly concerned with mantra and ritual. In the Brahmanas, we find commentary and explanation of the rituals. in the Aranyakas, explanatory texts, and there starts to be a shift from ritual to symbolism. And in the Upanishads are directly concerned with meditation and philosophy. So here, the sense of include and transcend that we're speaking about in reference to this holonic theory is that there's a shift at each stage, beginning from the external to the internal. So like here is exclusive, the Vedas are exclusively dealing with external ritual, addressing external deities. And the Brahmanas are still concerned with external ritual, but giving a greater insight as to the significance of the ritual process. So this continues, and by the time we reach the Upanishads, now the ritual, in a sense, has moved completely internal. That we're no longer working with external phenomena, but working with the internal processes. And then, of course, this is in the Vedanta Sutra, it has codified the most important topics from the Upanishads. And the Bhagavad Puran is giving the commentary on the Vedanta Sutra. So, briefly, in Jiva Goswami's presentation of Brahman, this sort of a scheme is being indicated. It's showing how ultimately the Bhagavad Puran is including and transcending all the other ranges of Vedic literature. And it will also consequently be giving or directing attention toward the most complete conception of ultimate reality. Now, this will tie in with the whole conception of ontology as well. I'm going to do a simplified presentation of ontology. Okay, so this again is, at least this part of the diagram is somewhat conceptual. This being the Jiva and Prakriti. So this is meant to show that they are two distinct categories of being, and yet they are interacting with each other. They are closely related to each other within the realm of conditioned being. And Paramatma includes and transcends Prakriti and the Jiva. Of course, Paramatma is entirely transcendental to both the Jivas and Prakriti, but they are included within Paramatma as its intrinsic potencies. Then Bhagavan includes and transcends Paramatma, and Swayam Bhagavan includes and transcends Bhagavan. Now, of course, all of these categories, in particular, as we move from Bhagavan, to Swayam Bhagavan, we could subdivide this many, many times. Into the, for example, the Chaturavyuha and Narayan and so on. So we could make many more circles. And even within Swayam Bhagavan, we could make Krishna in Dwarka, Krishna in Mathura, Krishna in Vrindavan. So you can see how these hierarchies of being are key concepts, throughout the Sandarbhas and throughout the all the Gaudiya literature. And of course, in looking at the epistemology, for example, the Bhagavad Puran really discloses this particular ontology of being. And this is why it is the most complete Paraman. Now, in sadhana, we're just going to make 3 circles here, although we could certainly add more, but just to keep things simple. Now, it might be questioned that we can see how Gyan transcends karma and bhakti transcends Gyan, but how is Gyan, or how does Gyan include karma? Now, one way to look at it is that the Uttarmimamsa, or the Vedanta, it doesn't deny the Purvamimamsa. It actually includes it or accommodates it as its prior stage. in the sense of being a certain preparation, for the Gyan path. But looking at it from another perspective, and now when we're speaking about Gyan, I'm not referring to Shankar Vedanta. I'm not referring to the radical perspective of Gyan, which would deny the relevance of any sort of action in terms of action directed towards liberation. But if we consider Gyan more in the sense of the Sankhya Yoga approach to Gyan, then karma is actually included within it, in the sense that meditation is an active process. And even the, let's say, we're working in Gyan, in Sankhya Yoga, we're working with internal alchemy. So we're working with all of the instruments or all of the materials required for transformation are already within the self. So we're working with internal structures, such as manas and buddhi and ahankar and so on. Now, when we come to bhakti, it must be understood that we are speaking about bhakti in the sense that the Goswamis have explained it, as a vritti vishesh of Swarup Shakti. Otherwise, the objection could be made that well, okay, you Vaishnavas, are following the bhakti path, so you're just putting back bhakti at the top of the pyramid, because that's your belief, or that is your path. But this seems arbitrary. On what basis can such a claim be made? So if bhakti is understood as a vritti vishesh of Swarup Shakti, and in the previous class we touched a little bit on, let's say, defining the tattva as Advaya Gyan. So, if the tattva is Swayam Prakash, okay, if the tattva is self-revealing, then what that implies is that the only way it can be directly known is through its own self-disclosure. And so this is to say that what discloses the absolute, because all sadhana is directed towards realizing the absolute. So what discloses the absolute is its own intrinsic potency. So if we understand bhakti as a vritti vishesh, this means a functional capacity Okay, it's a dynamic or functional capacity within the Absolute itself. So this is and it's also predominated by Samvit and Ladini, or in other words, by consciousness and by the bliss potency. So it is this potency, which is intrinsic to the Absolute, that discloses its own nature. And if we look objectively into the various wisdom traditions, even if they emphasize Gyan, nonetheless, what is essential in all paths is the dedication of the self, to the teacher, to the self-realized, let's say, masters of the path, and to the path itself. Even if you take the Buddhist path, for example, they emphasize surrender to the path, surrender to the Dharma, surrender to the enlightened masters. So this quality of surrender, which is the essential element in bhakti, is actually the key dynamic factor that makes all the various systems effective. So this is essentially what is indicated here. And in the case of, we only touched on it a little bit in the questions last time, this Vedanti Tat verse. What was pointed out was that this tattva, the ultimate reality, which is of the nature of non-dual consciousness, is disclosed primarily in these features as Bhagavan, Paramatma, and Brahman. And we discussed a little bit that if we take this verse in the most universal terms, that it can encompass all the various disclosures of the Absolute in all the different traditions of the world. But let's say that the disclosure, the Absolute discloses itself in direct correspondence with the core disposition of surrender. So, an interesting point is that when it discloses itself as Brahman, it simultaneously hides itself. It hides its nature as Bhagavan. The same can be said of Shunyata. When the Absolute discloses itself as Shunyata, it hides its disclosure as Bhagavan. In a sense, we can say that when it discloses itself as Bhagavan, although Bhagavan includes Brahman and Paramatma, but let's say these features recede into the background for the devotee, because the devotee wants to reciprocate directly with Bhagavan. So this is a principle of phenomenology that in the very act of disclosing, of reality disclosing itself, it hides other features. And this is also a universal principle in the sense that if we look at material science, that by reality disclosing itself as matter, it hides its nature as consciousness. Unless, of course, one penetrates to the core of that investigation. So, now we can go on showing how this Holonic theory is found in throughout the Goswami literature in many other aspects as well. In Prayojan, and we can, if we related some of these circles back to some of the earlier ones, okay, like in practice we had karma, jnana, and bhakti. So this would relate to karma is aiming at svarga, jnana at mukti, and bhakti at prem. So if we start putting all these diagrams side by side, we can make many, many correspondences between them. Then also within the prayojan, we could look at it from this perspective. Of the different rasas. Then we could make another circle like this, going from Rati, Prem, Pranayaman, Sneha, Rag, Anurag, and Mahabhav. So I think that you can start to see now the whole picture of how this Holonic theory actually runs through the whole gamut of the Goswami's writings. So in this sense, their writing is very, very modern. And these ideas, could be brought out to connect with, the findings in modernity. Now, I wanted to maybe just go back to the starting point of Tattva Sandarbha, the starting point of ontology. To bring out one more idea that Jiva Goswami introduces. And I call this bottom-up ontology. And top-down. So, in the Tattva Sandarbha itself, Jiva Goswami's treatment of ontology is quite brief. It's only in the last, from Anuched 50 or so onwards. This is quite an ingenious way of starting the whole discussion of ontology. So actually he begins with this bottom-up ontology. Of course he introduces the Vedanti Tattva Vidam verse as the sort of guiding principle throughout the whole discussion of ontology in the first 4 volumes. But he begins the discussion with the Jiva. Okay, and he cites a verse from the Upanishads, or actually from the Vedanta Sutra. Anya artascha paramarshaha. The deliberation upon the Jiva is in order to know the other. The other here meaning Paramatma. So why is this significant? Because in the investigation of reality, what is most available to us is our own consciousness. So when we begin to investigate the nature of our consciousness, which can be done with the taking support of meditation, for example. As we move inward and let's say, separate out the physical dimension, the pranic dimension, the emotion, mind, ego, and so on, we come in contact with the self. Now, through that type of investigation, which is, in a sense, isolating consciousness from all the various other dimensions of being that surround it or that cover it, we can get a glimpse of reality. And that glimpse of reality, from that glimpse of reality, one can begin to intuit the same type of disclosure moving upwards. So this upward movement is that if I come to understand myself as consciousness, as distinct from my thoughts, distinct from my feelings, the physical matter that I'm encased in, the mental processes, the ego, if I realize this or intuit this, then we can start to look at the world at large. That the world at large, in a sense, is the body of the Absolute. At least that which is, available to us again. We can examine the world at large, and the world at large is the macrocosm of which this body-mind system is the microcosm. So if consciousness, my own consciousness, our own consciousness, is distinct from this microcosm of the body-mind system, then there must be an immanent self that is the ground of being, that is the ground of matter, that is the ground of all, psychological archetypes. So this type of, beginning at this starting point, we can begin to intuit more and more, or higher and higher planes of reality. So that can lead us to the immanent self, and ultimately the transcendent self. So this is the first approach that Jiva Goswami presents. The first approach to ontology. And the second approach, the top-down ontology, he looks into the 10 topics of Śrīmad-Bhāgavata. The topmost being the ashraya, okay? The ultimate ground of being. Okay, and the point is made that the other 9 topics all, in a sense, elaborate what is implied by the ashraya. think I've gone through this somewhere, but yeah. In any case, we don't need to elaborate them in this particular moment. This is just to give the overview of Jiva Goswami's approach. So, taking these two things in coordination with each other, we can begin to intuit this reality. And of course, then in the next volume, Jiva Goswami goes into very detailed discussion of the Ashaya as Bhagavan in terms of all of Bhagavan's various potencies, his dham, his qualities, his name, form, qualities and action. So all of this is discussed in great detail. In the Paramatma Sandarbha, then of course the discussion is about Paramatma, the Jivas and Prakriti. And then in Krishna Sandarbha, Swayam Bhagavan. So again, this is a sort of overview of all of the topics in Sandarbhas. So I think we'll stop here for today. And if anybody has any questions, we'll be happy to take them. Yeah.
I missed the connection of when you were mentioning the Vedanti Tattvas. You were saying that if the reality is disclosing as Brahman, then it's hiding Bhagavan, for example. And I missed the connection of the verse with that statement, and the verse and this statement with the complete topic.
Yeah, the verse says, Vedanti tat tattva vidas tattvam yajganam advayam brahmeti paramatmeti bhagavan iti shabdite. So we discussed it a little bit in the previous class, that the first line of the verse is defining ultimate reality, and the word is used, the tattva, to refer to ultimate reality. And the verse is also saying that the knowers of reality, the tattva-vid, they define or they specify the tattva as advaya gyan. So this is very universal in the sense that the Absolute is here defined just as the tattva. The realizers are the knowers of that tattva. And it's making the claim that all knowers of that tattva agree that it is of the nature of non-dual consciousness. We discussed a little bit the last time also that this seems to be borne out by an investigation into the different paths. That they all seem to be pointing to this one truth, although they then define Advaya Gyan in different terms according to their individual path. So with that as the starting point, the second line is indicating that one non-dual reality, that non-dual consciousness, is disclosed differently to different seekers according to the path they follow, according to the core disposition of their surrender. So what this really is signifying, that the one non-dual absolute can disclose itself in an infinite variety of forms. And each of those disclosures has to be admitted as perfectly valid. That each disclosure is valid in accordance with the path and the methods undertaken. So any one disclosure cannot negate the validity of any other disclosure. But this is not to say that they are all simply one, or there's no distinction between them. There are important distinctions between them. And there is also a certain hierarchy of being between them, which we've tried to show today, through all these different, through this holonic theory. And so how we determine, what is the hierarchy of being, the Goswamis have given many criteria for understanding this. But the most simple criteria, or the most simple way of looking at it, let's move this. So, if we allow a further specification of the tattva as Satchitanand, or being, consciousness, and bliss, and by bliss we also mean aesthetic completion, or love. So, to simply exist, like we can say that that even this table or the chairs, they exist, they have being. But that which has not only being, or the quality of existence, but also has awareness, has a greater, it includes a greater dimension of being. But to exist and to be conscious, but without any feeling, without any action, just a sort of a monolithic state of awareness, which is kind of like what Brahman entails, is not, doesn't appear to be as complete as also having feeling, emotion, the capacity for love. So, it is to say that consciousness, to have consciousness is to have something in addition to mere existence. And to have love is to have something in addition to mere awareness. But if, let's say, if the person is identified with consciousness alone, okay, so like in the state of Brahman, Brahman is sometimes described as the expanded effulgence of Bhagavan. Even in the Brihad Bhagavatamrit, in Gopakumar's journey, at one point he has to pass through this blinding effulgence of Brahman. So this blinding effulgence of Brahman, which is also very attractive, particularly to those that are drawn to that path, then it is sort of a screen also. It hides what is behind the screen, which is Bhagavan. So this is the nature of the Absolute, that it doesn't, sometimes described as like a kalpa vriksha tree, or a chintamani gem. It doesn't force the person that approaches it, it doesn't force a particular benediction upon the seeker. It's as if to say, okay, what do you want? So it discloses what the seeker wants and hides the other dimensions of its being. So this is the principle that I'm speaking about, that in the disclosure of Brahman, Bhagavan remains hidden. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
DLD, you can speak?
Radhe Prabhuji, dear Lalit from South Africa. It's nice to see you after so many years. You talked about the ontology bottom up. You spoke about the Jiva, the immanent self, and the transcendent self.
Mm-hmm.
Can you just elaborate on those three topics, please, or what does it entail?
I mean, essentially, let me just move some of these things out of the way here. We have the self, the Atma, the immanent self, Paramatma, and the transcendent self, Bhagavan. Now, what do we mean exactly by immanent self? Immanent means that it is its involvement is with the world at large and the jivas, that are in that world. So Paramatma, although Paramatma himself is fully transcendental, but let's say Paramatma is that aspect of Bhagavan whose Līlā is entirely with creation, the Śrīmad-Bhāgavata. It is only, let's say, by the presence of Paramatma that Prakriti can unfold. And it is only by Paramatma being the ground of being that Prakriti is sustained and that the jivas are connected with their samskars that allow them to attempt to fulfill their desires within the realm of Prakriti, and that also gives them the opportunity ultimately to attain liberation from Prakriti. So, for example, in the Paramatma Sandarbha, it's clearly said that the jivas have no prior immediate connection with Bhagavan. Their connection is with Paramatma. They are, let's say, included within the being of Paramatma. So, Paramatma is that feature of Bhagavan that pervades Prakriti, thus allowing it to actually unfold. And at the time of dissolution, then both the jivas and Prakriti are, in a sense, dissolved back into, or re-enter Paramatma. Whereas Bhagavan is entirely transcendental to Prakriti. So in a sense, Bhagavan he's involved in his own Līlā. This is something that I find, in looking into many other wisdom traditions, that often the whole discussion about God or the Absolute tends to be about what his relationship, or what the Absolute's relationship is with the world and the living beings, which of course is an important part of the whole discussion. But it's almost as if there's no discussion about Bhagavan in his own in his own being. You know, they use these terms in Vedanta, the ekapad vibhuti and the tripad vibhuti. You know, so it seems that the whole discussion of the Absolute is in relation to the ekapad vibhuti. You know, as if God or the Absolute has, you know, nothing to do himself other than to create the world and the living beings. You know, when in fact, let's say, the real play of Bhagavan as the transcendent self has to do entirely with the tripad vibhuti, you know, with the realm of transcendence. You know, so this is let's say, the unique feature in particular of the Goswami books is that they are, while they do give a very detailed elaboration of Paramatma, the immanent self, the immanent self's relation to the jivas and prakriti, and all these things, but our attention is really being directed toward Bhagavan in his own transcendental existence. I sometimes refer to this as the interiority of non-dual awareness. So does that help to clarify the topic?
Yes, thank you.
So if there are no more questions, we can end here for today. Thank you for your attention. Jai Shri Radhe Shyam.